Welcome back to City's Family. Glad to have you for another SOS. It's a casual conversation where we're tackling tough issues around all things relationships. And today we have with us Pastors Kyle and Donovan and their wives, Margie and Maggie. And we're excited to tackle the conversation you've been waiting for: marriage, sex, and expectations. So let's just jump right in. What are some unhealthy or unhelpful expectations today for sex and marriage? Unhealthy or unhelpful expectations today for sex and marriage?
To think that it's going to be easy, to think that it's going to come naturally, to think that it's going to be like every movie or every television show that you've seen. That would be the first unhealthy expectation. And you may not even realize that that's the expectation that you have until you get married. And all of a sudden you realize that that's what marriage does to you. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize all the expectations that I have until they're unmet.
Yeah, because, newsflash. Hollywood is not giving you reality. They're giving you what you want, so you will give them money. So they want to give you your unrealistic expectations. Sorry to take it. All right. The Beatles, anything you want to add there?
I mean, it's connected to what Kyle just said, but I feel like the unhelpful expectation would be that you know what to do. And a lot of it's informed by movies and other such things, but it's like, I think you come into it thinking, oh yeah, simple, I know how anatomy works, so it's going to be fine. We're going to just know what to do. And I think that that's wrong. I think it's unhelpful.
Yeah, because, we'll get into intimacy with our next question, but sex, really intimacy, we'll put it that way, intimacy is much more than just actions to learn. It's really about learning a person, about growing in a relationship with a person, and that colors and that changes everything. So how about that? We'll transition right in. How is then the biblical picture of intimacy, how is it different than maybe cultural pressures for a more sexualized view of the world? So how is the biblical picture of intimacy different than what we may hear, see, think, or be shown from the world around us?
Culturally, most people view sex as, that's kind of like the goal of your relationship. It's like if you're dating someone or you're getting married, it's like sex is like the thing that you're looking to, But I think the biblical picture of intimacy is much more holistic than that, of which it is a part, certainly an important part. But I think it's just a part, It's not like I said, the goal of marriage. Sex is not like the culmination of everything your relationship's building towards. But in most cases, it's an expression of the intimacy that you have holistically, including sex, but also including everything else in that relationship.
Yeah, again, if you just watch television shows, or maybe if somebody who's watching this is caught in pornography, then they think of sex a certain way, and they tend to think about it a lot with intensity, maybe, instead of the word intimacy. And so I think that there's a whole intimacy level where some pastor, I don't know who it was, said you should always, when it comes to husbands with your wives, always touch her heart before you touch her body. And I think that's what that's getting at, is there's a holistic intimacy that tends to culminate or overflow in sexual intimacy. It's part of it goes much deeper. A lot of times and I think we're going to get into this, when you have a married couple that has a sexless marriage, they don't just have a sex problem. They have a much deeper problem that often goes months or years back and is tied to unforgiveness, bitterness, lack of communication, or larger issues of lack of intimacy.
Ladies, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say I think that the culture teaches us that sex is about what I can get and what feels good to me. And I would say that the biblical view of intimacy is, how can I serve my spouse? I want to learn them and what they enjoy, not this is all about me. So.
And even if I'm not, I think the culture say if you're not enjoying sex, it's almost like a tryout, right? So you try out sex with that person. If you enjoy it, then you know the relationship's going to work. But if you don't enjoy it, if you don't get what you want, then you can move on to the next one. But the biblical picture of a covenant, right, that all of everything we're saying, intimacy, all of this, has to happen within the confines of a covenant, because that gives the freedom and the space to be able to learn and grow together. So maybe, thinking back to your younger years, how long have y'all been married?
8 years.
Almost there. I was going to say a decade. So almost there. And you all are over a decade?
Yep, 11 years, 11 and a half years.
That's right. I won't ask you the date, put you on the spot. Congratulations, right? You did it. Very good. So how about this? What have you learned in your years of marriage that maybe you'd want to share either to your younger self or maybe to a younger person here with us listening today? What are some lessons you've learned about sex and intimacy in a relationship you'd like to share with a younger viewer?
One thing I have learned is that it just doesn't always happen naturally like it does in the movies. It's not always a passionate moment that just leads into this great act. So that would be one thing. And I completely forgot my other thing that I was going to share with y'all. I'm sure it was great.
That was a good one.
I'm sure.
Well, you often talk about planning it. It needs to be more planned. You know, it's not something that's going to happen spontaneously. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That was not it. But I do agree with you. No, just communicating, being willing to communicate after having sex, and being willing to be vulnerable and share what went well and what did not go well. That was very hard for me to get to that place where I was willing to talk about the experience.
And if as we talk about that it's an issue of intimacy, really. Sometimes talking about it can be almost more intimate than doing it. And so just to have that conversation face to face and say, this is what happened, exactly what you said, this is what went well, this is what didn't go well, maybe we could do this next time. That there's a vulnerability to that and a transparency to that a lot of couples who will have sex with each other will not even have the conversation.
You know, I think just with part of the unhealthy expectations, it's going right into this, that oftentimes, specifically with guys, I think we're told that if we perform well enough, then it will almost, ensure the intended result. That if you can do this well enough, if you are good enough at this, then your wife, it will always ever only be those intense run and kiss each other in the rain and whatever else type moments. And if with that kind of pressure, it doesn't give space for actual intimacy. Because then you don't want to receive criticism, constructive criticism, because you care. Because then that's deflating. Man, I didn't perform well enough. I didn't do it well enough, or whatever else. Instead of, no, I really want to learn and grow together. Very helpful. Anything to add?
Yeah, well, just one thing on the communication piece is, if you don't communicate about it, what happens is you get 10, 15, 20 years down the road, and you look back and you regret the sex, the intimacy the lack that you had in your marriage because you just didn't talk about it. And now you've got 10, 15 years that you regret. And it's like, let's not get there. Let's talk about it. The other thing I would say is, sex in marriage and even intimacy more broadly, especially if you start having kids and all that kind of thing, it's something that you have to put more strategic planning and thought into. It's usually, we have busy lives, people have jobs, we have things we're involved with, extracurriculars, depending on the ages of your kids, if you have kids, what they're involved with. The schedule gets really full, and a lot of times the first thing that gets kicked out is intimacy with your spouse and intimacy with God, ironically, those two things. And so in the same way that, the last series we went through, Make Room, it was all about how do you make room for intimacy with Christ. We talked about Sabbath, we talked about, silence and solitude, these things. But it takes intentional thought to actually develop greater intimacy with your spouse. You might have to plan sex sometimes. You might have to plan, regular, date nights or regular times you're going to have just conversations about life, about your relationship, about your family, all of those things. And it's going to take planning, for a lot of people, especially, in this busy, American life that a lot of us live. It's very busy, it's very full. And so you got to make room for that.
And you're not failing if you do make room for that. I believe that for a long time. But if we schedule it, then it's not like spontaneous how it's supposed to be, because that's what you learn. So that's a good thing to make room.
It also communicates priority and intentionality. If you say, hey, guess what? On Thursday night, that's our night. It communicates like priority, like whatever comes up. It's like that's on the calendar. In the same way that you prioritize whatever else you're involved with. It communicates priority, which I think is even a good thing in and of itself relationally, that I'm prioritizing you and you're prioritizing me in that way.
Often, if it's not there, especially intimacy, it can kind of snowball and just become very difficult to not talk about it. It's pushed out of the schedule, and it continues to be pushed out of the schedule. So what maybe practical tips or just words of wisdom, advice would you give to couples that are really living in a sexless marriage?
Well, even before that, I would say, and along with that, I would say we need to have the right expectations. I had a mentor tell me right before I got married, before you're married, Satan will do everything he can to get you in bed with one another. And then after you're married, Satan will do everything he can to keep you out of bed with one another. And I think what a lot of couples feel like, if I'm talking to couples who are dating or engaged, they feel like the sexual drive is so strong. We want this so bad. As soon as we're in marriage, it's going to be easy and awesome, and we're probably going to be having a sexual, encounter daily or something like that. And you got to go, that's actually most likely, maybe after the honeymoon or a week or two after that, that's not going to be normal. I think what I would encourage people with is to say that sex is like any other discipline in your life, and it might be weird to think about it that way, but it's something that you can actually, your best, how do I say this? Your best sexual experiences with your spouse are not going to be on your honeymoon. That's kind of the Christian dream. Oh, I've kept myself pure. As soon as we get to the honeymoon, it's like, no, everything's going to be awkward, and that's wonderfully awkward. But over time, intimacy, as you get to know one another better, as you communicate more before and after that, 10, 11, probably 20, 30 years in, I've got friends who've been married for many years and, say that their sex lives are the best now in their 50s and 60s than it was when they were much younger.
I think a lot of times it's hard to commit to the act of sex when you don't feel loved or cherished. So I would say if that were me, I would want to be taken on a date. I would want to be told, this is what I love about you. I would want to hear those things, and I would want to see some tangible examples of, I desire to be with you. That makes me feel like I want to give myself to you. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, I desire you as a person, not I desire your body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The challenge is to care more about intimacy than sex. And if you find yourself in a sexless marriage, then take those tangible, practical steps toward love and intimacy in regular rhythms. And very helpful point, a Christian movie that was released a handful of years ago, maybe a decade now. I can't remember what it's called, but the book that's actually very helpful, it's called The Love Dare, I think it is. It's kind of silly, in Pastor Kyle's words, a little goofy. But it is very helpful in that it gives daily devotion, reading from Scripture, and then also a challenge. Hey, today, why don't you write down something you're thankful for your wife and verbally tell her. So if you're sitting there and you want to know what does it look like to practically show love and care and intimacy, that could be a helpful, tangible resource that would give you daily examples of how to grow in intimacy. Guys, any other thoughts? Or
Well, I don't want to let the women off the hook too easily, because I do
on the hook. What is it?
I think a husband can bend over backwards and do everything, try, say, do all the 5 love languages, and the woman is still maybe has a heart of bitterness towards something he did. And so obviously that needs to be communicated too. But I just, men may be doing all that they can and the woman is still saying no. And so to the women, I would say, just say yes, just go for it. And I do think sex is an overflow of, the rest of your marriage, other parts of your marriage that are doing well, but I also believe, and I believe we have experienced this firsthand, sometimes just saying yes to sex consistently actually helps with the rest of all those other areas. I think you said you had a really good way of communicating it early of not gets the wheel spinning, but just...
Oh, yeah. That as we talked about the series on spiritual disciplines, sometimes your spiritual disciplines, or even a discipline, sometimes it's a way for you to remind yourself to do something you love, and sometimes it's a way to kind of jumpstart your affection and your love.
That's right.
And I think you mentioned the spontaneity piece, the unhealthy expectations, thinking if it's not spontaneous, it's not worth it. And also an unhealthy expectations, think if you're not in the mood when your partner is, then you shouldn't move forward because it's not worth it.
That's that service piece. Like, serve, die to yourself. I guarantee you, it will not end with you being like, well, I regret that. Like when you serve your spouse, it really does bless you. And I would say too, I think this could be for either the wife or the husband. If you have bitterness towards your spouse about something, A, if you can vocalize it, communicate that. But B, I would just push you to think of some things you're thankful for. There are things in your spouse, you married that person for a reason, right? Like you think that they are wonderful. And so just speak some of those things over them. Don't just keep it to yourself, but tell them like, I think you're a wonderful father, or I'm so thankful that you serve our family in this way. And those things I think can soften your heart of bitterness and really kind of break some of the ice there.
And I think having the right I keep saying this, but the right expectations for sex. I mean, sometimes sex is vanilla ice cream. Other times it's a banana split. But it's always dessert, right? And so I think having and on a serious note too, I mean, I really feel like I just want to say, as I talk to the pastors and elders of our church, one of the reasons that among many other reasons that we were doing this series, is you cannot have a healthy church without healthy marriages. And a sexless marriage is not a healthy marriage. And so we're not here to beat anyone up. We're here to build people up, and we want to give people hope. If they find themselves if they feel like we are sexless roommates raising kids, which I think is more common than we know, then we want to bring a word of hope. We want to say, you need to build more new memories. You may need to get some counseling and some help. You may need to let one or two people in. We believe not here in privacy, not secrecy. And you just may need to realize this is more common. I think what Satan wants to do is he wants to discourage you, tell you your situation is unique, your struggle is unique. Nobody else struggles with this, especially not if they've been married for 5 years, And so I just think that this is why we're having these uncomfortable, even us, the five of us, this is why we're having these uncomfortable conversations. It's not that this is something that we all want to talk about in front of everybody else, but it's that we feel like this is an important conversation. If we can, through our own stumbling and fumbling and mumbling, if we could be helpful to other people, that's what we want to do.
And maybe speaking about just common realities and with expectations, maybe to the unmarrieds, but also in marriage too, maybe helpful to put a finger on and kind of give voice to some unhealthy expectations that maybe pornography can bring into a relationship, can bring into your expectations. Again, maybe specifically for the unmarrieds or maybe just in general, but help to give some language to point out some of those specific unhelpful expectations that our pornographic culture can feed and can leak into the bedroom.
Well, going back to the kind of sex as an act of service, in Ephesians 5, everybody knows about the husbands and the wives passage. Husbands, love your wives, and but right before that, verse 21, I believe it is, Paul's saying, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. Usually, pornography and things like that are about the individual. How can you serve your needs, which is the opposite of what I just stated, which comes from Ephesians 5. And so, if you're creating expectations based on these things you're watching, you're creating a lot of times it's going deeper than you think it is. That's how a lot of things work in life. It's going deeper than you think, and it's going to be harder to get rid of than you know. And it's creating in you this need for meeting your own needs. It's creating a habit in you of looking to your needs first instead of the needs of others, the needs of your spouse, your future spouse.
I guess I would say we've had the conversation about intimacy. Pornography is all about intensity, and it's a lie. It's all about the individual. It's all about the selfishness of it. You begin to have. I'm assuming people are watching pornography by themselves. You begin to have a sexual experience by yourself. So I think there's a lot of things that begin to happen that are unnatural that we don't even realize. And I think for women, the not to the exact same extent, but are these romantic comedies, even these aggressively romantic novels. I'm thinking of the 50 Shades of Grey, which, from what I was told, was one of the fastest-selling fiction books in human history. And men may be hiding, and women, I know, struggle with pornography as well, but men might be hiding behind their devices with pornography. They're saying now women are reading trashy romance novels. at a greater extent because they can put it on their Kindle, they can put it on their iPad, they can read it on the plane, and nobody even knows. I think they both create unrealistic expectations, one physically, one emotionally.
So maybe as we're landing this plane, lightning round, right? We're just making up a lightning round. Lightning round. Quick tips, quick points of advice as we're heading out the door for married couples to take their next step for intimacy and within their relationship.
Some of this has been already said. I'll try to say it a different way. Create new memories. I think people after a while, it's been 6 months, it's been a year or two, they feel like there's no romance, there's no love, there's no sex in their married relationship. You need to begin to create some new memories. And maybe I'll put that burden on the guy especially, but to create some new memories. And again, Maggie said it, I believe, a little earlier, but just to begin to have a culture of affirmation instead of a constant culture of critique in your home.
Margie?
I would say humble yourself and be willing to communicate. And I would say, I know it's a lightning round, but let me just sneak this in here. For the women, I think we're told, like, we're not supposed to want sex. And that was the struggle for me for a long time of, like, if I initiate, that's weird. Like, that's his job. Like, he's supposed to pursue, he's supposed to initiate. But, it's good to schedule, whether you initiate that way or you initiate other ways. Don't be afraid to do that as a woman. It's a good thing.
It's biblical. Okay.
It's
Song of Solomon, right? Kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. That's the woman speaks first in the Song of Solomon. So yes, the man should pursue, but it can be both ways. That's exactly right.
I would say this is not original, but just create some excitement around it. Send a text message while your spouse is at work, like, I'm looking forward to tonight, like, or just have fun, play around, like, make it fun and exciting.
I would say, I would obviously echo everything that's been said. I would also say that just understand that it's like Kyle said earlier, like most disciplines, like most things in life, you get better with it. Both the actual act of it, but also how it interacts with your schedule and how you kind of keep, just trust that, like, as you continue to learn each other, that takes time, right? So, just because you're married and you can have sex doesn't mean that, you still don't have learning to do. And so just kind of trust the process, as they say, learn each other and trust that it's going to continue to get better over time.
That's a great place to wrap up. Trust the process. Thankful for you guys joining us today for this conversation, and we're looking forward to our next SOS conversation. Thank you for joining, and see you next time.